But at UCLA, I'm a first-year student. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Okay, so I'm just gonna give a quick kind of breakdown of like the approach for writing a college essay. So it starts with the prompt. There are some instances in which you can like decide a prompt. So we're gonna kind of approach that, like making sure that you read the prompt carefully and like breaking down what the prompt is asking so that you can like answer all the questions. Next is brainstorming. So just kind of the process of getting down all your ideas. Like there's no such thing as a bad idea, just kind of getting everything down so that you can ensure you have like the best idea that you've had. Next is the rough draft, which is basically the process of writing your essay, like editing it. It's gonna be multiple drafts. It can be definitely like a long process. So just make sure that you start on time. Peer review, this is only a step that if like you're comfortable having people read your essays, that you can have someone read it and kind of edit it and give some feedback. And then the last one is the final draft. So just some last minute checking for some grammatical errors, the flow, and stuff like that. And then you're ready to submit.
Right, so I'll start off with the prompt. So, you're gonna have some options as to what prompt you wanna write on when you're, applying to colleges. I think the really important thing when you have this entire application is to try and show as many different aspects of yourself as possible. You can't have every single, essay you write just show like how great you are at like biology. Like they wanna know that there's something more than that. So when you're choosing a prompt, or multiple prompts throughout the application, really keep in mind, what does this one show? What can I show with that one? What side of me is going to be displayed? Because you want to show them you're a well-rounded person. You're not just you may be fantastic at biology, but a lot of people are just fantastic at biology. Not a lot of people are also great at, piano or do community service or do any of these things. So look at the prompts, be genuinely passionate about what you're talking about. If, you say, oh, sometimes I take care of my neighbor's cat, and sometimes that's cool. Don't just show that just because it's something different, but just talk about your diverse passions. And I guarantee you, if you think, oh, I don't know how many I have, you take a moment, you just look at what you do in an average week, you're going to find that there are a couple of things that you're into. So yeah, just brainstorm first if you're stuck. And I think that's about it for this slide. Once you have a prompt, the thing to do is, a prompt is basically like an essay prompt, like when you're writing in class. Your teacher's always going to tell you, like, what's the question? Make sure the thesis answers it. Go back to the thesis all the time. You have to make sure, what is this prompt specifically asking and how you're going about it. If the prompt is, mention a time you face adversity and won in the end or whatever, you have to make sure that there is an obstacle. Like whatever story you're writing out, there's an obstacle right there. You can't ignore one of the fundamental pieces of the prompt. So you already chose it. You know what you're trying to do. Just write down in layman's terms as plain as possible what exactly you're trying to say. And then the rest of the essays, you just using narrative or vocabulary to try and make it prettier than a plain sentence. You only have so many words, but each section is going to need to do something different within your essay. So make sure that when you're writing your essay, you know what you're going to do here, what the purpose of it is, write down what you want to get in your essay, and then figure out, where can I fit this? And maybe you'll figure out, I don't have enough space. Maybe this isn't as important. So planning out is really as important, just like any other essay you do in class. And then always check back on the prompt, because I know sometimes you can start writing your essay, you get involved in so much of the actual text that you forget the prompt itself, and you realize, oh, I've kind of strayed away from what I'm trying to say. So always check back and make sure that what you're writing is a reflection of what's being asked. So yeah.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about brainstorming, which is a really important facet of writing any college essay. And so we're going to break this down into both the supplementals and the personal statement. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a personal statement. And so the biggest component, honestly, I think of brainstorming is asking the right questions. You really want to be probing deep into your personal experiences and everything that has shaped you in your life. And so generally a good way to start, if you're not really sure where to start, is instead of going into something with a really specific idea of what you want to do or what you want to say, is just to actually think about general questions about yourself and your life. And so some of these questions are, who are you? What matters to you, what values do you hold closest to your heart, and so on and so forth. And usually these questions don't really have a super straightforward answer. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be because your life is very, very interesting, even if you might not think so. And you definitely have a unique story to tell. And so definitely take notes about all of the things that come to mind, even if they seem really scattered and all over the place. Make sure to jot them down and what you think about those questions. After thinking about the above questions, the next piece of advice is to try and really hone in on the different life experiences and events that have shaped you. And so when you're thinking about like the values that you hold closest to your heart or who you are or what matters to you, usually there's a reason behind why you think that way. Maybe it's I don't know, something that happened with a family member or just experiences you've gone through, adversities you've overcome. So you really want to try to think about the different experiences that have shaped you and given you the values that you have. And after you think about those defining moments, you should also list those out as well. Um, After you kind of have those two steps completed, you want to really reflect upon these experiences. And so this is basically where you think in depth about, like how these experiences have actually changed the way you think and what you've learned from them. So you want to ask yourself, what lessons have you been taught by these events? How have you grown and changed as a result of this topic? Is this topic a critical part of your identity? And is this a defining moment of your life and how so? So also take notes on those questions. These are honestly just starting points. A lot of times you'll see that when you start thinking about these questions, you might find yourself going down a rabbit hole of more questions, and that's totally how it's supposed to go. And so generally after you've given some thought to these issues, it may not seem like you have a super clear-cut topic, but what you want to do is you want to parse through your brainstorming notes and ask yourself, is there a central theme kind of unifying these experiences? Do you have, like one really strong message you feel like that connects all of them, even if they may seem seemingly unrelated at first? And if there's a way that these events are connected, how so? And how to best tell that story. And that's usually how you're going to go about crafting your personal statement. And it's important to remember that a lot of the times that you might think about the different things in your life and they may seem unconnected at first, but in reality, there's usually an underlying theme going through all of them. And so the point of your personal statement is to actually kind of weave all of them together and kind of create intersections of the different unique components of your life that really show who you are, even if it doesn't seem like it is super connected at the first sight. So that's enough for the personal statement. The next slide is going to be about the supplements. And so supplementals are generally easier than a personal statement in the fact that they require a lot less depth. So you don't really need to think as much about those big life questions like, who am I? What do I want to do? They're a lot more straightforward, like, what do you want to study? Why do you want to apply to this school? What's an extracurricular that matters to you? And so there's a pretty simple step I like to follow for these. The first one is honestly just to read the prompt. I know that's a big given, but you really want to make sure that you answer exactly what's being asked. I find a lot of times it's easy to stray off topic when they ask you about something. So make sure you hit all components of the prompt. Step two is to list potentially relevant answers. This is especially useful when they ask you to write about an extracurricular that means a lot to you. So jot down notes about the different lessons that each experience taught you. And this will kind of help you decide which experiences are worth writing about. You'll probably notice that there are some things that you do that are more important than others that you care more about. And so usually those take priority when you're trying to decide what to write if you have too many options. This third step is to do research if necessary. So this one is really appropriate for the questions that ask you why school, like why this school or why this major. A lot of times people think these questions are easier because you can just recycle the same answer you wrote for all the other schools, but you actually want to avoid doing just that because the schools are looking to see that you really have put in the effort to look into their programs and look into their campuses and what really distinguishes them. So like an example of what not to do would be to say, oh, I can't wait to study at Stanford because the campus is gorgeous and some of the professors are really amazing and I want to be surrounded by like brilliant peers. Like this is all stuff that you could potentially mention, but that definitely cannot be your whole essay, because you can honestly take that statement and say it about any other school that exists. So some specific things you could look into are unique traditions each school has about campus culture that makes you really like it. Each school has some really unique, cool traditions to look into. You can look into a specific professor. If you want to say, oh, there's brilliant professors at the school, look into a specific one who's maybe done research on a topic you're really interested in studying, and say you want to take one of their classes. Look into the different clubs that exist on different campuses, so on and so forth. So make sure to do the research if that's something the question is asking. And the fourth step is to review your potential topics and to make an outline with the best one. So you might feel stuck a lot of times because you feel like there's just too many things you want to write about and you don't really know which ones. So usually you want to just make an outline, and that'll really help you see which ones you actually have enough content to kind of like create a full, thorough response for. And the last tip with this step is that you want to consider your response in context of the rest of your essays. And what this means is that a lot of times, especially for private schools, you'll have a ton of supplemental essays. And the way you want to think about these essays is that each of them are a different opportunity to show the school a different facet of your personality. So you really want to show your academic side, like your intellectual vitality, but you also want to show them your fun side, like your personality. You want to show them all these different parts about you in all of your essays. And so you want to see your essays as like a holistic package of who you are. And so maybe if you spent a lot of time on one supplement about something really academic that intrigues you, maybe one of the essays can be more lighthearted and fun and showcase your personality a bit more. So that's just something to keep in mind. And yeah, that's all I have to say about brainstorming.
Okay, perfect. So now after you finish brainstorming, you want to start your rough draft. You actually want to start writing. This for me, honestly, is the hardest part just because I don't know how to start. And I think it's a big issue for all of us. A lot of us get writer's block because we don't necessarily know how to start, but there's no right or wrong way to start. I think a rough draft isn't meant to be perfect. You just want to write down all your ideas, put them into paper. It's okay if it's messy or too long because you're going to revise it and edit as soon as you finish. So you want to put all your thoughts onto paper, clean it up, reread it over and over again. You can go through as many rough drafts as you want. I went through at least 4 rough drafts until I finally submitted my personal insight questions. Take your time with the editing process, but make sure that you watch out for the deadline, especially the UC deadline. It's in 2 days, I believe. Some colleges do extend their deadline, but keep in mind that you want to give yourself enough time to submit because it does get a little overwhelming when so many people are starting to send their applications at the same time. Once you feel confident with your rough draft, you want to have someone else review it. And remember, rough drafts are not meant to be perfect. It's okay if it's not the best work. You're going to have time to fix it. You can go to the next slide.
And so because we have so many rough drafts, this is why the review and the revision process is so important. And sometimes your essays, you'll write them on personal and sensitive topics. So if you aren't comfortable revising them, that's totally fine. But if you are comfortable, it's really good to ask a friend, trusted adult, or teacher to see if they can look over your essay to check for flow, grammar, anything that they seem is off, because flow is super important in an essay when you want to have certain parts of it go along and tell it like a story. And if you don't know who to start with, your high school counselor is a great place to start. They can give you some really valuable information. They are knowledgeable in UC Common App and Coalition App areas. And if someone does recommend changing something, don't feel pressure to change it. This is your story. So if you feel like that change wouldn't fit as well, maybe take that advice and try to spin it in a way that you can fit it into your essay and see if you can rework that into a different solution for your essay. And don't have too many people make suggestions, and don't have too many people try to revise your essay, because again, this is your story, this is your voice, this is not others. So try to make it as unique to yourself as possible and make it the story that you want to tell. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, so when you get to your final draft, I'd recommend going through and kind of editing out any excessive word or verbiage that you see. Even if you're already at or even under the word limit. It helps to keep your work really clear and concise and straightforward. Also, it just helps you make the most of your word count. If you have any extra words that you need to add in the end, then you'll have space to do that. Then just taking breaks in between reading your essays. A lot of times, if you keep on reading it over and over and over again, you're going to miss things that you otherwise would have caught. And then, of course, reading it out loud will help you with your flow and then also help you catch more grammar mistakes. And then one tip that I found pretty helpful was going through and either summarizing each paragraph in a sentence or making bullet points of each paragraph, or having someone else do that, which is also really helpful because it kind of helps you see what themes that you're actually successfully communicating through your essays. And then also it helps you with structure as well. If you summarize each paragraph with a sentence, you can kind of see like how your paragraphs are flowing. And then just in general for the essays, just to keep in mind, like Caitlin mentioned earlier, try to make sure that you're using these essays to add something new about yourself. This is a space to kind of showcase each aspect of your personality. Or if you have been talking a lot about your extracurriculars, which have been highlighted in that section, you can use that essay to kind of showcase that in a more like personal and like interactive light. And then also, as mentioned earlier, you can have other people read it over as a read over your final draft. Okay. So again, as mentioned earlier, so these essays are kind of showcasing a 360-degree view of yourself. In the personal statement, the thing to keep in mind is that this kind of represents the backbone or like the foundation of who you are as a person right now. And I know that sounds like kind of intense, but while brainstorming, you can think about events, relationships, experiences, or identities that kind of make up that backbone of like Victoria, for example. And just make sure to be very like honest and raw, especially for the more like serious essays. I think that it really helps the reader empathize with you, connect better with you if you're just kind of really sharing all of the things that you felt in that moment in time. And whether it is more serious or more lighthearted, it's still very important to be descriptive, especially if you are sharing the emotions that you felt. Having like physical descriptions, like my hands were shaking, my heart was racing as I walked down, blah, 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 blah. It just kind of helps you with that kind of storytelling aspect, which is something that you should really be working on highlighting. And it just helps the readers just better empathize with you in that moment. And then another important part is to focus on you. You guys have probably all already heard this, but especially if you're talking about in a relationship with another person, make sure that almost every sentence you're tying it back to how it affected you. You are the focus of these essays. They're trying to see if you would fit on campus, not the other person that you're writing about. So just make sure that you're tying it back to yourself. And then also one thing that really like kind of made me more relaxed in doing this process is to remember that you don't need to find a completely unique topic. I know that I was kind of panicking because I was like, there are literally millions of applications that have been sent out. Like, how do I find the one topic that nobody has written about? And this really isn't as important as everyone makes it out to be. Because if you're choosing a topic that has really shaped you, if you're telling your story, you're reflecting on your experiences, you're sharing your emotions, then there's not going to be anyone else who could have told that story. So if you're writing about a relationship with your grandmother, for example, and you're like, wait, a lot of my friends talk like maybe shared about relationships. Well, again, there's no other, like your grandmother is one person, you are one person. There's no other way that somebody else could have told that story.
Okay, so now we have the supplemental essays. These are, I guess, the more fun questions, you know, whereas Victoria mentioned you might have some serious topics coming up in the other essays. These are really simple. They tend to be shorter, so you have to make your word count, really matter. But the questions we have here are things like, why this school? What's your favorite book? And then some, random question, like if you could go back in history and meet any person, like who would it be? These are meant to, get to know you better. If anything is about personality, it's specifically these questions. So just for these top two in bold, because these tend to be really common. What's your favorite book? Mention a unique book that you genuinely like. Doesn't have to be super rare. I know some people are going to be scared, like, oh, what if my, Harry Potter is genuinely my favorite book. Well, I'm sure like you can, I'm sure you can genuinely come up with a reason why, other than like, it sparked my interest in, wizardry or something. Like you could honestly come up with it. If it's true, I think it's going to work. So you just have to make sure you write in a way that's impressive too. And then for why this school, I really, really emphasize this point. You have to research the school. You cannot use bland terms that can be applied to any school. I researched the schools I was applying to like so deeply. I remember like even for interviews, I mentioned things that I found in the research, and even the interview was like, oh, I didn't know we did that. That's pretty cool. There were schools that like I genuinely like didn't know anything about a month before. And then later on, like the people would tell me like, wow, like this is obviously your dream school. And I'd be like, yeah, of course. I researched the heck out of it. So yeah, again, unique school traditions, classes, maybe big events. Make sure that they're still current though. I remember one time I almost mentioned something that like didn't happen in the past 5 years. So make sure you look at research, and also just be, genuinely consider like, why do I want to go to this school? Maybe your answer is simply prestige or, financial aid, but there are plenty of schools that can do that. So you got to be honest. Why do you want this school? And then just let that go on the page. So like I said, limited word count. So make each word count. If there's honestly any kind of essay question that I spent the most time revising, it was probably these, because I would always go 1 or 2 words over. And I'd be like, no, okay, now I have to cut this out. And then I'd go like a bit under, and it'd be like, but I can definitely use an adjective somewhere. So these are really important. I really encourage you, because I don't know, you get 50 words for what your favorite book is. And if you could just write like the color purple, and you're like, oh man, but now I have 47 other words. So just write what you think feels natural, and take advantage of the word count you have. So like I said, application is to try and show who you are. That's why they ask for transcripts. That's why they ask for personal recommendations. That's why they ask for all these different interview questions. So always ask, when I answer this, what am I showing? Have I shown this before? Does it sound like my only thing is this? They're giving you ample opportunities to just touch on other sides of yourself. And then again, keep your voice unique. I think Victoria mentioned this, and it's super, super true. I think a lot of you are going to say like, how am I unique? I go to XYZ school. My favorite drink is boba. None of this is really significant. If you try to write like, if you try to present some fictionalized, like ideal student version of you, know that thousands of other kids are writing to pretend to be that same student. So in the end, you're not going to be unique if you try and pretend to be someone else. You are going to be unique if you are yourself. And that, just be, totally honest. So yeah, I would just recommend trying to show who you are, and trying to let your voice be heard. Don't feel bad, and don't ever think, you have to shove away some part of yourself, because I think the part of yourself you may not want to present may be unique in the most powerful way. So yeah.
Okay, so for the personal insight questions, as many of you know, like the application is due, like I said, in 2 days. Most of you should have started already, and you haven't. It's okay if you just get it done as soon as possible. So there are 8 questions, but you're only required to answer 4. Now, when I selected the questions, I picked the ones that represent myself and my story. In these responses, you want to showcase your different your profile, your personality, your interests. You want to talk about your story, your background. Where do you come from? Like, why is that important? Why should they take that into consideration? You want to demonstrate your growth and improvement. You can definitely show this through all your personal insight questions, especially the question about the challenge, because you talk about something you faced, and then you want to answer it by stating the steps you took to overcome that adversity and why that's important in college. Like, why is the lessons you learned from these challenges important? How is that going to ensure your success in college and in your future? You want to show resilience. You want to show that you can overcome adversities, because overcoming life adversities helps you overcome academic adversities as well. Because in college, you're going to face a lot of challenges in and outside of the classroom. You're becoming a young adult, and you're going to face academic struggles as well, because it's a different environment. So you want to showcase that you have the resilience and ability to succeed in college. You want to highlight how you're making a difference in your community. So what have you done outside of the classroom to help your community, whether that be through community service or internships or any other extracurricular activities that show that you care about the community. You want to discuss your passions and inspirations behind them. So for example, I think one of the questions asks you to describe an academic subject that inspires you. The way I answered that question was that I mentioned how I was inspired, how my passions were inspired. So my passion is social justice. I talked about how I developed this passion by learning about Chicano history, and how that inspired me to pursue a degree in Chicano studies, because I want to help out my community. So you want to show the steps that that have encouraged you to follow a passion, and how you plan to use that passion to make a difference in your community. Again, you want to elaborate on life outside of school. So they want to know what you did outside of school, extracurricular activities, internships, and any other stuff that you think are relevant. Again, you want to emphasize your future goals and how you plan to achieve them. Another advice I would recommend for the personal insight questions and for any other personal statements, you want to show the colleges and universities what you have to offer, because they know what they can offer you. They have the services, they have the resources to ensure you succeed, but they want to know what you can bring to the table. And I think that's very important for you to highlight in all your insight questions. You also want to make sure that you talk about the skills and the lessons you've gathered from your adversities. Show how those skills and adversities, show how those skills and lessons like will benefit you and the rest of the college community. Yeah.
Okay, hello. So we are going to talk about some types of essays to avoid, but we're also going to talk about how you guys can fix them or make them better if you do want to write about these topics. So there are some common cliches I'm sure you guys have heard of. So just really quickly to summarize, there's a lot of saviorism hero stories. It comes a lot from volunteer experiences or extracurriculars. Or organizations students start kind of like to address a social issue, so on and so forth. Sports injuries are also a very common topic, as well as volunteer or mission trips abroad. Number 4 is writing about someone you admire, look up to. 5 is tragedy. That's usually something like either, a death or a divorce within the family or even a close friend, so on and so forth. And then 6 is moving across the country. So next slide. And now we're going to talk about how to fix it. So I was planning to write about one of those essays about a cliche that was just mentioned. That doesn't necessarily mean you actually can't write about those topics, because a lot of these topics are actually, they're cliche for a reason. A lot of people go through them and they can be very transformative and really shape your experiences. So just some general tips on how to specifically fix them. So first of all, try to take a unique approach. For example, if you really want to start about writing about a sport, even though a lot of people are, don't start the essay with you scoring the winning goal. That is extremely overused. You really want to kind of look at things with a unique lens from your own perspective if you choose to write about these topics. The second tip is that if you do choose these topics, explain why your story is unique and unlike the others. And the third one is to focus on specific moments rather than really overarching general experiences. And the last of all, make your story multidimensional. And so that kind of just summarizes the first 3, to be honest. So instead of basically what makes a lot of these essays very cliche is that they have a similar lesson that people usually get from them. And so that's why they seem very overused and not unique to who you are. So some of the ways to actually fix that and to incorporate the unique approach and why it's specific to you and why you're focusing on specific moments is, so for example, like for a saviorism or hero story, of course you can write about like a cause that you really care about or a social issue. So let's say you want to address like homelessness or something and you've started a project on it. You can by all means write about it, but you really want to make sure that you don't come off as like your project has somehow like saved or fixed the problem. A lot of times like people have inadvertently been saying that through their essays. It really seems like a cookie cutter solution to say that you started an organization and like suddenly the problem has gone away. So like to make things more concrete, if you're part of like Diversify or narrative, like you really don't want to frame it as, oh, because like this organization exists, like we've like really solved racial justice. Like that is far from the case, and that's the last thing you really want to present. And so that's something to be really mindful of if you choose to write about a social issue. For a sports injury, you don't really want to leave with the lesson of, you know, I got an injury and then I had to like overcome it and it just like moved my life all over the place and my plans were all thrown up in the air. If you do choose to write about that, you really want to connect it to the specific lessons that you got from it and like what you did in that period of time where you didn't really know what direction your life was going. The same thing comes with like the saviors and with the volunteer trip. I think if you write about someone you admire or look up to, Victoria's already covered that. Focus on yourself for those essays. So like it is okay to write about someone if they really inspired you, but you really want to be careful that you're not writing the entire essay about them and you're writing it about yourself and how you have changed as a result of that person, and really focus the essay on your personal development rather than the person you're writing about. In terms of a tragedy, like you want to avoid themes like life is short and, you know, I was really sad and then I overcame it. Obviously that will be like an underlying theme that goes with it, but you really want to focus on how like the event actually changed you and like inspired you to do something, how it really shaped you as a person. So for example, like if someone, if you have like a close friend that passed away from like substance abuse and that's now like an issue that's really close to your heart and you've like done some work on it, you can talk about how that really inspired you. Or, you know, like if you have a family member who passed away from cancer, you could definitely write about how that's inspired you to really pursue medicine in like a really specific way and like the specific lessons you were taught from, you know, being a caretaker for your family, so on and so forth. And so yeah, those are just some ways to fix your essay, but that's all I have for this slide.
Okay, so that was our proper presentation. So thank you for coming to the presentation, but now we're gonna have kind of a general like Q&A, and then we're gonna go into a more specific like breakout room Q&A. So if you want, you guys can send your questions in the chat and I'll start reading them to our panel. Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. Let's see if I find, so this question says, what are your thoughts about YouTube channels that are from students that go to your schools? So like, I guess like asking about the advice that they give, if you've like seen their videos.
I think Victoria did a pretty good job of answering this. So, okay, so personally speaking, I think like some of them can be really helpful in the advice they give. But the one thing you do want to be cautious about is like their experiences are like very specific to who they are. I think you have to remember that like there's so many people on every college campus, like they don't really have the same experiences. Like I know Victoria already said this in the chat, but like my experience at Stanford has been very, very different than a lot of the Stanford YouTubers. So don't let like their like the parts of their life that they're showing you be the only perception you have of that school, because it's very likely very different for honestly any person. So like take their advice, but also be cognizant that there's a lot more nuance than what you're seeing on the camera.
Another question we have is, should supplementals be more straightforward or more like storytelling and flowery?
Yeah, I'll go over this. With your supplementals, especially the ones that are really short, you know, some schools will be 50 words, some schools will be 200. It just really depends on how much they give you. If you have a 50-word supplemental and the question is just what's your favorite movie, I don't know how much narrative you can pack in there. But if you have 200 words and it's, if you could go back in time, who would you meet? I definitely think you can try and do something there if you want to. I remember I had that question, and that one I tried as hard as possible to make it a narrative, and I think it really helped me out. But don't don't feel like you have to force, something in if it doesn't work out. Some questions lend themselves to that. Who do you want to meet in the past? That's a very personal question. Some are, what's your favorite food? And maybe there's a story behind that, but don't ever try and, force something unless it's genuinely there, because that's going to be the easiest way and the most effective one.
Okay, our next question is, would you consider starting a club saviorism?
Okay, I can go on this one. So I wouldn't consider it as saviorism, like just from the outset. I think a lot of people start clubs and they're great because they do address social issues. I think you just want to be cognizant of like what like the work that you're doing and like your own motivations behind it. I think like in general, clubs that address social issues or anything are like helpful and it's a really good way to raise awareness, but you want to make sure you're not only doing it like just to put on your resume. I think that's just the most important part of it, is make sure that you're putting like your heart and soul into what you're doing. I know that sounds really cliche, but as long as you're doing that, I don't really see a problem with it.
Okay, this next question says, would you like consider talking about like the pandemic and how it's affected your life, like a cliche essay?
I think I can try to answer this one. I think talking about the pandemic, depending on how you write about it, it can fall in the cliche area, mainly because we're not the only ones going through the pandemic and a lot of other people are affected by it. But as always, you can always twist it and make it unique to your own situation. If you do write about the pandemic, maybe don't focus it as the main focus of your essay, but try to use it as a way for how it fueled something that you were able to accomplish or something that like helped you realize. Like, don't make it the entire essay. I don't know if I explained that well, but yeah.
Okay, this next question is about when we talked about like researching like schools. So they said, how would you research a school and like write about it without making it sound like a research paper?
Yeah, I could do that one. I think it's just showing genuine enthusiasm for the things that you found during your research. Because it's very easy to make it seem like you just research something. Like, I can't wait to go to the blah 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 biology festival, which is held every Thursday on the blah blah blah. It's like, obviously that's not. I don't think that's something you'd really be excited for. But if you talk about like things that you mentioned before in your essay, I know I mentioned in my application I was really into film. So I would look up any film clubs that were on campus. And I know, there'd be the film festival for this school or something. And I'd mention like, I am genuinely excited for this. I'm genuinely excited to meet a group of people, this or this or that. So I think, because, your entire application is a holistic thing. It's you can bring validity to your research by just mentioning things that you've already shown that you're passionate for. Because you don't want to say like, oh, I'm a biology major, but I'm really interested in this school's I don't know, interest in tree conservation, when that has nothing to do with what you mentioned before. They'll be like, okay, that's just something unique to us. So maybe they're just, you want to make sure it's genuine enthusiasm. I think that's a lot. I think that's something people forget. Like, they forget to be like really genuine in their applications, because they feel like if I am genuinely not good enough. But you guys, really are. So yeah, just be honest, I think.
Okay, the next question is about like diction and word choice. So like, would you recommend like looking up and like using lots of big words to like sound smarter or like more educated?
Yeah. I think like, okay, you want to walk on like a pretty careful line with this one. Obviously you want to use like stronger, more powerful words to really like convey your message and like make it an exciting story. But at the same time, you don't really want to sound like a 40-year-old man, like who's already graduated college. So like I would say like when you're going through your essay and you're saying like, oh, how can I make it better? Like feel free to look up some adjectives if you feel like some words can be like more strongly conveyed. And use those, but like don't go out of your way to like go to thesaurus and like try to replace every single word with like a bigger one just to sound better. I think that really takes away your voice. I think at the end of the day, you have to remember admissions officers know that you're in high school and they don't expect you to talk like a fully educated, like college graduate PhD student. And so you don't really need to worry about making it sound like that. Just make sure that the words you're doing or choosing to use like actually convey the excitement or the emotions that you're actually trying to portray. But other than that, you should be good.
Okay, the next question is about the overall like application process. So they're saying, what do you think would be like the most important aspect of the college application? Like, I think they're asking like grades, test scores, extracurriculars, or like essays. So like, what do you guys think?
I think I can answer this one. So the way that I think about it and the way that I found to be true is that like for grades, those are just kind of like the way to like get your foot in the door. They really aren't the most important part. And I would say that for test scores too, especially with COVID, I think that colleges are going to be more understanding about like how hectic everything has been. So right now, especially in the past too, I think that I can say that the most important part is definitely your essays. These colleges are getting so many applications, especially like the like quote unquote like elite colleges. They're getting applications from like students with great grades, test scores. Like what makes you stand out is your essays because you're able to show that you are like a human being. Like you want them to be able to like see you on campus, not everyone else. Like, you with you want to like have a conversation with you. So I would definitely say that is the most important part.
Okay, next question is actually kind of about Dawn. So they said, if we talk about Dawn, is it okay to say that it sparked like their interest in social justice, and kind of like what would be their best way to like approach writing about Dawn in a college essay?
Yeah, I think so a short answer, like, yes, it is definitely okay to say it sparked your interest in social justice. I think that with like talking about any organization that you join, there's so many different ways you can choose to write about it and like why you're in it. Because I think everyone has a very specific reason of why they do what they do. So, like, for example, let's say like if you're interested in social justice or racial justice because you are personally impacted, like as a person of color, you can totally write about that and your experiences that really led you to be involved. You can also write about it if, for example, like you came from, I guess, like a more ignorant like family who like didn't really understand the importance of justice and equality. And so maybe you had some personal growth to overcome as well as a result of like being raised in that environment and how like suddenly like you had to learn to shift your own perspective and it really inspired you to do the work. I think like everyone comes from a lot of different reasons and rationales for doing what they do in Dawn, which FYI, I know there's some people that aren't from Diversify narrative on this call, so we just abbreviate it as Dawn. But everyone has different reasons, and I think this applies to like any organization you're in, whether that's like I don't know, like Future Business Leaders America or like JSA. I don't know. Lots of different clubs and orgs out there. Totally okay to put your own spin on why you're in it.
Okay, so this next question is for people who like aren't necessarily applying to college right now. So just asking like for juniors and I guess like sophomores and freshmen, like when's the best time to kind of start looking at colleges, and like when's the best time to start applications? If you guys have any advice for like freshmen, sophomores, and juniors about like college and stuff like that.
I think I'll answer this. I think the best time to start working and doing your research on colleges is probably around your junior year, just because around that time you get a good idea of what you want to pursue or what you're interested in and where you're trying to go. I would recommend that you start researching the universities that you're interested in, find out what they offer, and look into the professors and the different programs they have, even the clubs as well. Um, in terms of like starting your applications, I would also suggest like around your junior year, because the next year you're gonna have to apply. in the summer it'd be best, just because during the school year it does get a little hectic because you have so many assignments, especially your junior year, overwhelmed with a lot of homework and a lot of other college stuff. So during the summer, take the time, create your accounts, your Common App or your UC account, and start looking over the questions, start brainstorming what type of responses you want to have, and have people review or help you like format these essays, because they require a lot of time and you want to make sure that you send out the best responses that you can possibly write. That would be how I would work on my applications.
Okay, so the next question is just basically asking like if you guys could like talk about your personal experience like writing your college essays, like maybe some of the struggles you faced or some things that you guys found particularly difficult or maybe easy, things that you like, things that you didn't like.
I think I can start. I think the one struggle I had writing my essays is that when you're writing your responses, you can't really follow a structure like as if you were in AP Lang. You can follow like a certain structure for your rhetorical analysis essay, but for college apps, it's not really that. It's like you kind of more had to go in your creative writing and storytelling, and don't expect to have certain structure. Don't expect to have like 3 paragraphs, minimum 5 seconds, 5 sentences or whatnot. It's just go with the flow. And it was really hard for me to do that because I'm used to following a structure. And don't be afraid of rough drafts because I had a lot of revisions to make.
I think for me, like the thing that made it hard was just like brainstorming. I always like did this thing where I would feel like my essay wasn't complete or like I didn't properly like convey what I was thinking. And so I just went through like a ton of different drafts. Um, I specifically like wrote like for my personal statement, like I wrote about an organization I was in. So I was part of JSA. And it was hard for me to write about because like obviously I love the club, but like I don't really know what to say about it. Like I don't really like I knew it was important to me, but I didn't really know how to convey like 3 years of like involvement in something that meant a lot to me, like 650 words. I feel like there were so many different things I could say about it. And so, like, I think honestly, the thing that helped me the most was just making a ton of different outlines. I actually wrote 3 different drafts of my Common App just from 3 different angles. So they were all about the same thing, but they weren't like about the same lesson. And then I actually had a couple of my teachers and friends look over them to decide which one they thought was best and like highlighted my personality more, just because I think my judgment was getting a little cloudy because it was about myself. So if you're really stuck, like feel free to crank out a couple of extra drafts if you have the time. You don't have to, but that's what I did and that's what helped.
Okay, so if no one else wants to kind of share about their experience, we're going to go into the next section of our panel, which is going to be the breakout rooms. So I'm going to be sending you guys each into like a breakout rooms with one of our panelists or myself, and you guys can like ask maybe some questions that haven't been answered yet, or maybe get some specific feedback or questions asked. So let me do that right now. Okay. So you guys should be able to go to the rooms that you're interested in. I think they should all be labeled. So you guys can go ahead and leave to those and maybe join. If not, I can start assigning you guys to rooms.
Okay, yeah, we are gonna work on assigning you guys. I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but give us like 30 seconds. Okay, hold on, guys. Sorry. I think I'm gonna ask Lexi to give me co-host setting, and then I'm gonna assign you guys because I think there's something wrong with her setting really fast. So just hang in there. We will get to y'all really soon. Okay, honestly, okay. This is not working for us right now, but okay. So I think a lot of people are in breakout rooms, but there's only a couple people on here right now. So if you guys want to just ask me questions, feel free and I will um be able to take care of them if you want.
Hi, I wanted to ask, do you know like anywhere outside of school and like your college counselor that you could get anyone to like read your like personal statement thing?
Yeah, usually, so a lot of times like you could potentially ask your school teachers. Like I had a lot of my teachers actually look over them, and I personally found it most helpful to ask my friends to read over them for me. I think like okay, like you could potentially ask a college counselor, but I know a lot of times like that can be inaccessible to people because of money and all these other things. So um, a lot of times your friends will actually give you better advice because they know you better and that they can speak a lot more to your personality. So if you want a second pair of eyes to do that, feel free to do that as well. Um, so yeah,
That's great, thank you.
of course.
Okay, Kate, sorry to interrupt real quick. Can you make me a co-host? I just made you the host.
Okay, I'm gonna send you guys to rooms.
Okay, hello everyone. So we're back in the big session. So I hope you've enjoyed the panel and got your questions asked. Thank you all so much for coming, and we're going to be sending out a survey to maybe kind of see what other events you guys would be interested in. So maybe keep an eye out for that. We will be having another panel next month. And yeah, that's it. Thank you all for coming. Bye.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you guys. Bye. Happy
you so much.
holidays.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.